Listing Rules, Biotech. Introduction. On the 30th of April, 2018, new Hong Kong Stock Exchange listing rules came into effect, aimed at broadening Hong Kong's listing regime, to attract the listings of companies in high-growth emerging and innovative sectors. The listing rule changes allow the listing on the stock exchange of two new categories of company: 1. Pre-revenue biotech companies, and 2. Innovative and high-growth issuers, which have weighted voting rights structures. The new listing rules also create a new secondary listing route for innovative companies, with primary listings on qualifying exchanges. The amendments implement proposals set out in a consultation held at the start of 2018. The stock exchange published its consultation conclusions on a listing regime for companies from emerging and innovative sectors on the 24th of April 2018, which follow the consultation paper, released in February 2018. The new listing rules include 3 new chapters. Chapter 8A provides for the listing of new economy issuers with weighted voting right structures. Chapter 19C provides a new secondary listing route for companies primary listed on certain qualifying exchanges. And Chapter 18A provides for the listing of pre-revenue biotech companies, which meet a new 1.5 billion Hong Kong dollar market capitalization requirement, and other additional biotech company-specific listing criteria. New guidance letters also came into effect on the 30th of April 2018. The first listing applications under the new listing rules were filed in early May 2018. Xiaomi Corporation, the Beijing-based smartphone maker, was the first company to list with a weighted voting rights structure, and raised $5.4 billion in the world's second-largest IPO, in the first 9 months of 2018. Meituan Dianping, another weighted voting rights structured company, raised $4.2 billion. Ascletis Pharma, maker of HIV cancer and liver disease drugs, was the first pre-revenue biotech company to list under the new listing rules, raising $51 million in August 2018. Nasdaq-listed Chinese biotech Beijing became the first company to secondary list under the new listing rules. It was also the second pre-revenue biotech listing on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. New rules for listing pre-revenue biotech companies. Introduction. The exchange has added a new Chapter 18A to the main board listing rules, for the listing of biotech companies, which cannot meet the main board's financial eligibility tests. Guidance on the factors the exchange considers in determining listing applicants' eligibility and suitability for listing under the new rules is set out in a new guidance letter, titled Suitability for Listing of Biotech Companies HKEX GL 9218, the Biotech Guidance Letter. The aim of the listing rule changes for pre-revenue biotech companies is to attract listings of China's new generation of biotech companies, amid growing competition from the US and Chinese stock exchanges. It is hoped that the rule changes will allow the exchange to overtake Nasdaq within 5 years, in terms of the number and market capitalization of Chinese biotech listings. Higher Hong Kong valuations are apparently another key attraction of Hong Kong listing. The listing rule changes aim to attract more listing applicants from the high-growth tech and biotech sectors, the Hong Kong market having been dominated in the past by old economy, low-growth sectors, notably the financial and property sectors. The financial requirements for listing on the exchange have acted as a bar to listing biotech companies, whose R&D costs typically mean that they do not make profits for some time. 1. Definition of biotech companies. Biotech companies are defined as companies primarily engaged in the research and development, application and commercialization of biotech products, processes or technologies. The definition of biotech is the application of science and technology to produce commercial products with a medical or other biological application. 2. Listing requirements. Expected market capitalization. Biotech companies are required to have a minimum expected market capitalization of 1.5 billion Hong Kong dollars at listing, according to Listing Rule 18A. 032. Suitability for listing. In addition to the general requirement that the exchange must consider the listing applicant and its business to be suitable for listing on the exchange. Biotech companies must meet the following requirements, set out in the Biotech Guidance Letter, to be considered suitable for listing under the new Chapter 18A. A. The biotech company must have developed at least one core product, beyond the concept stage. The exchange considers a core product to have been developed beyond the concept stage, if it has met the developmental milestones specified for the relevant type of product in paragraph 3.3 of the Biotech Guidance Letter. That paragraph sets out the stages at which different biotech products are regarded as being beyond the concept stage. 1. Pharmaceutical small molecule drugs. For core products that are new pharmaceutical small molecule drugs, the applicant must demonstrate that a. It has completed Phase 1 clinical trials, i.e., clinical trials on human subjects categorized as Phase 1 by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, or an equivalent process by another competent authority. Competent authorities are the FDA, the China Food and Drug Administration, and the European Medicines Agency. And b. The relevant authority has no objection to the commencement of Phase 2 or later clinical trials. Phase 2 trials are those on human subjects as categorized by the FDA or other competent authority. For core products that are pharmaceutical small molecule drug products, which are based on previously approved products, for example, the 505(b)(2) application process of the US FDA, the applicant must demonstrate that it has successfully completed at least one clinical trial, conducted on human subjects, and that the relevant competent authority has no objection for it to commence Phase 2, or later clinical trials. 2. Biologics. A. For core products that are new biologic products, the applicant must demonstrate that it has completed Phase 1 clinical trials, and the relevant competent authority has no objection for it to commence Phase 2, or later clinical trials. B. For core products that are biosimilar, the applicant must demonstrate that it has completed at least one clinical trial on human subjects, and the relevant competent authority has no objection for it to commence Phase 2, or later clinical trials to demonstrate bioequivalency. 3. Medical devices including diagnostics. A. For core products that are medical devices, which include diagnostic devices, the applicant must demonstrate that 1. The product is categorized as a Class 2 medical device, under the classification criteria of the relevant competent authority, or above. And 2. It has completed at least one clinical trial on human subjects, which forms a key part of the application, required by the competent authority, or the authorized institution, being an institution, body, or committee duly authorized, or recognized by a competent authority, or the European Commission for conducting, assessing, and supervising clinical trials, in the relevant clinical fields. The exchange has the discretion to recognize other institutions, or bodies as authorized institutions. And 3. Either the competent authority, or the authorized institution has endorsed, or not expressed objection, for the applicant to proceed to further clinical trials, or the competent authority, or, in the case of members of the European Commission, an authorized institution, has no objection for the applicant to commence sales of the device. 4. Other biotech products. A. The exchange considers other biotech products on a case-by-case basis, to determine if the applicant has demonstrated that the product has been developed beyond the concept stage, by reference to factors referred to in paragraph 3.3 of the Biotech Guidance Letter, and whether there is an appropriate framework, or objective indicators to make an informed investment decision regarding the listing applicant. A determination to accept such a listing would be a modification that may only be made with the SFC's consent, under Listing Rule 2.04. For applicants eligible to list under Chapter 18A, references to core products refers to the biotech product of the relevant listing applicant. B. The biotech company must have been primarily engaged in research and development for developing its core product, or products. C. It must have been engaged in the research and development of its core products for a minimum of 12 months prior to listing, and in the case of a core product which is in-licensed or acquired from third parties, the listing applicant must be able to demonstrate research and development progress since the in-licensing acquisition. D. The primary reason for listing must be the raising of finance for research and development to bring its core products to commercialization. E. The applicant must have registered patents, patent applications and/or intellectual property in relation to its core product or products. F. If the applicant is engaged in research and development of pharmaceutical small molecule drugs products or biological products, there must be a pipeline of those potential products. G. The applicant must have received prior meaningful third-party investment, being more than just a token investment, from at least one sophisticated investor, at least 6 months before the proposed listing, and that investment must be continuing at listing. In the case of a spin-off listing from a parent company, the exchange may not insist on compliance with this requirement, where the applicant can otherwise demonstrate a reasonable degree of market acceptance for its research and development and biotech product. Whether an investor is a sophisticated investor, for these purposes, by reference to factors such as net assets and assets under management, relevant investment experience, and the investor's knowledge and expertise in the relevant field. The Biotech Guidance Letter paragraph 3.2 GI gives the following as examples of sophisticated investors. 1. A dedicated healthcare or biotech fund, or an established fund, with a division or department that invests in the biopharmaceutical sector. 2. A major pharmaceutical or healthcare company. 3. A venture capital fund of a major pharmaceutical or healthcare company. And 4. An investor, investment fund, or financial institution, with minimum assets under management of 1 billion Hong Kong dollars. Whether a third-party investment is meaningful, is assessed on a case-by-case, taking into account the nature of the investment, the amount invested and the size of the stake and timing of the investment. As an indicative benchmark, the exchange gives the following, as examples of investment amounts, that are typically considered to be meaningful investments. Where market capitalization is 1.5 billion to 3 billion Hong Kong dollars, and 5% or more of the applicant's issued share capital, on listing. Where market capitalization is 3 billion to 8 billion Hong Kong dollars, and 3% or more, and where market capitalization is greater than 8 billion Hong Kong dollars, and 3% or more. Track record. Biotech company listing applicants must have a track record of operating in their current line of business of at least 2 financial years, prior to listing under substantially the same management, according to Listing Rule 18.8.03(3). Ownership continuity and control. The exchange reviews any change in the applicant's ownership, within 12 months prior to the date of the listing application, in assessing the applicant's suitability for listing, according to paragraph 4.1 of the Biotech Guidance Letter. An applicant must have available working capital to cover at least 125% of the group's costs for at least 12 months from the date of publication of the listing document, after taking into account the IPO proceeds, according to Listing Rule 18.8.03(4). These costs should substantially consist of a. General, administrative and operating costs, and b. Research and development costs. The exchange expects a substantive portion of the IPO proceeds to be applied to the subscription of shares by existing shareholders. Biotech companies, which list under Chapter 18A, are expected to have significant ongoing funding needs to bring their core product or products to commercialization. Existing shareholders and biotech company listing applicants may wish to continue to participate in post-listing fundraisings to prevent their shareholdings being diluted. Given the likely funding needs of biotech companies, and the important role played by existing shareholders in providing continuing funding, existing shareholders are allowed to participate in a biotech company's IPO, provided that the company complies with the public float requirements of Listing Rule 8.08(1) and Listing Rule 18.8.07. Public float restriction on cornerstones. It was proposed, in the consultation paper, that the shares allocated to cornerstone investors should not be taken into account in determining whether a biotech company has met the minimum 25% initial public float requirement under Listing Rule 8.08(1) on initial listing, and up to the expiry of the 6-month lock-up period. For cornerstone investors, existing shareholders are allowed to subscribe for IPO shares to avoid their shareholdings being diluted under the Hong Kong Stock Exchange Guidance Letters 43-12 and 85-16. Existing shareholders who cannot satisfy the conditions under current guidance for subscribing for IPO shares can participate in the IPO of a biotech company as a cornerstone investor. IPO shares subscribed by existing shareholders do not count towards the public float. However, shares subscribed before the IPO by existing shareholders who are not core-connected persons or not recognized as a member of the public under Listing Rule 8.24 count towards the public float. Due to concerns on the restrictions on cornerstone investors raised by respondents to the consultation paper, the exchange allowed some flexibility for biotech companies whose market capitalization exceeds the minimum 1.5 billion Hong Kong dollars required. Biotech listing applicants are required to have a minimum public float of 25%, representing 375 million Hong Kong dollars of public float at listing. The 375 million Hong Kong dollars public float must be achieved without including subscriptions by the company's existing shareholders and subscriptions by cornerstone investors. Provided a listing applicant can meet this requirement, cornerstone investments and existing shareholders' subscriptions can be included in determining the company's public float, provided that the existing shareholders and cornerstone investors are not core-connected persons of the company, or otherwise are not recognized as members of the public, under Listing Rule 8.24. Connected persons post-listing anti-dilution rights. Respondents to the consultation paper raised concerns that substantial shareholders, i.e., holders of 10% of biotech companies, would be prevented by the exchange's connected transaction rules from avoiding dilution of their shareholdings by subscribing for shares in a post-listing share offering. They considered this could be problematic for biotech company listing applicants that are likely to have significant ongoing funding needs to develop core product or products to commercialization, and that existing investors would likely want to participate in post-listing fundraisings to prevent a dilution of their shareholdings. A substantial shareholder is a connected person under Chapter 14 of the listing rules. Although there is an exemption for issues of new shares to existing shareholders, this only applies to pro rata issues to existing shareholders. Thus, a non-pro rata issue to a connected person would be conditional upon shareholders' approval, and any shareholder with a material interest in the transaction would be required to abstain from voting. While the exchange acknowledges that biotech companies are likely to have significant ongoing funding needs, it also notes that an issue of shares to a substantial shareholder is allowed, provided it is approved by shareholders who do not have a material interest in the transaction. It does not therefore propose to change the listing rules at this stage, but will monitor developments and consider whether a further review is necessary in future. 3. Enhanced disclosure requirements. Biotech applicants must provide enhanced risk disclosure in listing documents, including information relating to a. their strategic objectives, b. details of each core product, including 1. a description of the core product, 2. details of any relevant regulatory approval required and/or obtained for each core product, 3. a summary of material communications with the relevant competent authority in relation to its core product or products, unless disclosure is not permitted under applicable laws or regulations, or the directions of the competent authority. 4. The stage of research and development for each core product. 5. Development details by key stages, and its requirements for each core product to reach commercialization, and a general indication of the likely timeframe, if the development is successful, for the product to reach commercialization. 6. All material safety data relating to its core products, including any serious adverse events. A description of the immediate market opportunity of each core product, if it proceeds to commercialization, and any potential increased market opportunity in the future, including a general description of the competition in the potential market. 8. Details of patent or patents granted, registered and applied for, in relation to the core product or products, unless the applicant is able to demonstrate, to the satisfaction of the exchange, that such disclosure would require the applicant to disclose highly sensitive commercial information, or an appropriate negative statement. 9. In the case of a core product which is biologics, disclosure of planned capacity and production-related technology details. And 10. To the extent that any core product is in-licensed, a clear statement of the issuer's material rights and obligations under the applicable licensing agreement. C. A statement that no material unexpected or adverse changes have occurred since the date of issue of the relevant regulatory approval for a core product, if any. Any material changes must be prominently disclosed. D. A description of any approved products, i.e. biotech products approved for commercialization by a competent authority, owned by the listing applicant, and the length of unexpired patent protection period, and details of current and expected market competitors. E. Details of the biotech company's research and development experience, including 1. Details of its operations in laboratory research and development. 2. The collective expertise and experience of key management and technical staff. And 3. Its collaborative development and research agreements. F. Details of the relevant experience of the biotech company's directors and senior management in the research and development, manufacturing and commercialization of biotech products. G. The salient terms of any service agreements between the listing applicant and its key management and technical staff. H. Measures, if any, that the applicant has in place to retain key management or technical staff, for example incentivization arrangements and/or non-compete clauses, and the safeguards and arrangements that the applicant has in place in the event of the departure of any of its key management or technical staff. 1. A statement of any legal claims or proceedings that may have an influence on its research and development for any core product. J. Disclosure of specific risks, general risks, and dependencies, including 1. Potential risks in clinical trials. 2. Risks associated with the approval process for its core product or products. And 3. The extent to which its business is dependent on key individuals, and the impact of the departure of key management or technical staff on the applicant's business operations. K. If relevant and material to the biotech company's business operations, information on project risks arising from environmental, social, and health and safety issues. 2. Compliance with host country laws, regulations, and permits, and payments made to host country governments in respect of tax, royalties, and other significant payments, on a country-by-country basis. 3. Its historical experience of dealing with host country laws and practices, including management of differences between national and local practice. And 4. Its historical experience of dealing with the concerns of local governments and communities on the sites of its research and trials, and relevant management arrangements. L. An estimate of cash operating costs, including costs related to research and development, and clinical trials incurred in the development of the core products, and costs associated with 1. Workforce employment. 2. Direct production costs, including materials, if it has commenced production. 3. Research and development. 4. Product marketing, if any. 5. non-income taxes, royalties, and other governmental charges, if any. 6. Contingency allowances, and 7. Any other significant costs. In particular, biotech companies are required to a. Set out the components of cash operating costs separately, by category. b. Explain the reason for any departure from the list of items to be included under cash operating costs. And c. Discuss any material cost items that should be highlighted to investors. If the applicant has obtained an expert technical assessment, that assessment should be included in the listing document, where relevant and appropriate. And n. Listing documents must include a prominent warning statement, in respect of each core product, that it may not ultimately be successfully developed and marketed. Financial report disclosure. Biotech companies must disclose in their annual and half-year reports details of research and development activities, including a. Details of the key stages of each of its core products under development to reach commercialization, and a general indication of the likely time frame for it to reach commercialization. b. A summary of expenditure incurred on research and development activities, and c. A prominently disclosed warning that a core product may not ultimately be successfully developed and marketed. Delisting. The exchange has the power to suspend dealings in the shares of a biotech company, which does not maintain sufficient operations or assets, as required by Listing Rule 13.24, or may cancel its listing under Listing Rule 6.01. The exchange can also give a company up to 12 months to comply with Listing Rule 13.24, after which its listing will be cancelled if it is still in breach, in accord with Listing Rule 18.8.09. Prohibition on fundamental change in business. Prohibition on fundamental change in business. Listed biotech companies require the exchange's consent for any acquisition, disposal, or other transaction, or arrangement, or a series of such transactions, that would result in a fundamental change to the company's principal business activities, as described in its listing document, in accord with Listing Rule 18A.10. Stock marker. Stock names of listed biotech companies have the marker B at the end of their name, under Listing Rule 18A.11. Meeting the main board financial eligibility tests. Once a listed biotech company is able to satisfy the financial eligibility tests, under Listing Rule 8.05, Listing Rules 18A.09 to Listing Rule 18A.11 cease to apply, i.e. sufficiency of operations, the exchange's consent requirement for material change in business, and stock marker requirement. Biotech companies are a new sector for Hong Kong listings, having previously been prevented from listing by the financial eligibility requirements for profits, revenue, and cash flow. The first listings of biotech companies occurred in the summer of 2018, and there is a pipeline of biotech companies that have applied to list in Hong Kong. Applicants have been able to submit listing applications since the 30th of April 2018.